Are you a sad individual living under a Parisian opera house and dropping chandeliers on people's heads, which are fun? Well, you may want to stop because that's a crime and get yourself a podcast. How do you do that? Easy. It's with Anchor. Anchor is a totally free app and website, and you can record from your phone or your computer. You don't need fancy smancy equipment. Seriously, I have recorded podcasts from my bathtub while I was bathing. Anchor is free and super easy to use. Anchor has really simple podcasting tools. You sign up and then you start podcasting. It really is that simple. Within an hour of starting my podcast, I was already distributed on Spotify. Now I'm on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Breaker, and Radio Public. So look for the app or the website. The website is anchor.fm, and the app, just go to your friendly local app store and look up Anchor. That's ANCHOR. Happy podcasting! Chapter 2. A Fateful Interview. The boys are waiting for the Rolls Royce, and they are dressed in what is described as their Sunday best, which is nice, it makes sense. I mean, they're gonna meet Alfred frickin' Hitchcock, so they should dress up as nicely as possible to make a good impression. It makes sense. So anyway, the chauffeur comes, and before did I say chauffeur? That chauffeur. No, that's what I said. That's even weirder. Anyway, sorry about that. I should cut that out, but I probably won't. But anyway, so before, it's apparently the car was made for an Arabian sheik, which, sure, I mean, I guess the Arabian sheik didn't need that particular car, or were they talking about that model was made for the Arabian sheik? I don't know, but anyway, so the chauffeur comes out and he's like very posh and very stodgy, and he's like, "Ooh, call me Worthington," and the kids are like, okay, because I mean, it's the 60s, but they're still kids, and he comes out and he opens the door, and Jupiter's like, we're pretty young, we can do that yourself. And Worthington's like, oh no, I've used to doing it, so this is something that fulfills me, or is something like that. It's kind of strange, because I mean, you think the dude would appreciate being given a break, being forced to drive around. Like, how old are they supposed to be? I think like 12 or anywhere from 12 to 14. I know that in the reboot of the series in the 90s that they were of driving age, but then there's the bully. What's the bully's name? Oh, I can't remember. It was a really stupid name, and it's like, I remember thinking, gosh, I mean, I've been bullied, but can you imagine the humiliation of being bullied by, like, what was it? Oh, this is gonna drive me bonkers. It was like Stinky or Skinny or something really goofy like that. But anyway, so they get in the car and drive off to meet Hitchcock. So they're in the car, and Jeep is talking to Worthington, and he's like, well, we're detectives, so we may go to some strange and unusual places. And Worthington's like, sure, why not? Which, I mean, makes sense, because, like, whatever the dude's doing, he's getting paid for it. And, like, basically all he has to do is wait in the car. And so Jupiter makes specifically sure that he has used the car for 24 hours of 30 days. I could do the math, but I'm lazy. But, yeah, he's basically suggesting that he'd be totally cool with calling poor Worthington at 2 a.m., pretentious little jerk. But anyway, here's what I remember being amazed by, like, when I first read this book. So they're talking, and they discover that there's a mobile phone in the car. Now, I'd been under the impression that at the time I read this, which was in the 80s, was that mobile phones weren't invented until the 70s. This is not true. The first mobile phone was actually used in 1946. 1946, can you believe that? I couldn't believe it. I was like in shock. But anyway, so he says to Worthington, hey, we're going to Alfred Hitchcock's studio. It's okay. I called him. And Worthington's like, yeah, whatever. So the boys are actually kind of concerned as to how Jupe thinks he's going to get away with this. And so they pull up to the gate at the studio, and Jupiter pretends to be Alfred Hitchcock's nephew. Now, remember, it's been stated that he was a pretty successful child actor, so this isn't completely unreasonable that he'd be able to do it and get away with it, and people would believe him. But nowadays, this would not work. There is no way that would happen. So naturally, the people are like very kowtow and catery, and because they think that Jupiter's Hitchcock's nephew, and so they get to the office, and Henrietta recognizes Jupiter, and she's like, "Oh, so you're imitating Hitchcock's nephew? I don't think so, because she's a good secretary and she's doing her job, and we're supposed to see her as the enemy, which is ridiculous, because let's face it, if this happened nowadays, this would be horrifying." So Henrietta is trying to get them away, and Jupiter puffs up his cheeks like all Hitchcock-like, and he's like, well, I think that he would want to see my acting ability. And Henry's like, oh, I'm sure that he would. And then, as they're arguing, who should show up but Alfred Hitchcock? So Alfred Hitchcock invites him to the office, and they have a chat about finding the haunted house. And Alfred Hitchcock's like, look, I have 2 location scouts. I'm fine. I really don't need the help of small children. And so they talk for a while, and Jupiter basically cons him into letting them try it. So he's like, yeah, why not? And he's like, if we do this, you have to introduce us as detectives. And Alfred just sounds like, fine. And then, like, after they're done talking, he's like, wait, there's a reason Henrietta wanted me to see you. And Jupiter's like, oh, yeah, because I can do this impression of you as a boy. And Alfred Hitchcock's like, that's not good. So Jupiter does it, and Alfred Hitchcock is horrified. He says that it's monstrous, and that if Jupiter ever does that again, he'll be sleeping with the fishes. See? Or that's kind of the general idea of what you get. Like, he is not pleased about it at all. So the chapter ends with the boys looking for a haunted house. Chapter 3. Report on Terror Castle. Bob gets off work and heads immediately to the Jones salvage yards to find out what happened the day before with Alfred Hitchcock. He goes to the headquarters, which is a place that Jupiter pretty much cleared out, and his aunt and uncle kind of forgot about it, so they can basically hang out there and nobody knows that they're there, and will do things like make them actually work in the salvage yard. And it's super cool because the place has like a laboratory and like a dark room, and there's like hidden entrances all to it, so basically they can sneak in and out. It just sounds neat, doesn't it? Doesn't that sound like a place that you'd like to go? But anyway, so Jupiter finally sees Bob, and he's like, you're late. And he's like, yeah, I had a flat tire. And PTO is talking about the research he did on Terror Castle, and it sounds pretty creepy. He was harassed by the bully Skinny Norris. Yep, I was right, not Stinky, but Skinny. But yeah, like I was talking about earlier, Skinny is the only person who has a car because apparently his father works somewhere out of state where they basically can give driver's licenses to children. I have no idea what that's about, or if that was like even a real thing, but I'm probably gonna look it up later. So Pete was trying to keep the goods from Skinny, but unfortunately he left a card that had Terror Castle written on it, and they assumed that Skinny Norris knows what's up, and I'm sorry, I can't believe this guy is going around calling himself Skinny Norris. But anyway, so they talk about what happened and why Terror Castle became Terror Castle, and it turned out that it was built by a man named Stephen Terrell, who was an actor in the silent film days. And then they started making talkies, and it turned out that Stephen Terrell had a very high-pitched voice and a lisp. And unfortunately, people didn't think that that was very conducive for him to be a monster, and basically he was laughed out of Hollywood. So Stephen Terrell basically, they found the remains of his car off a cliff, and they assumed that he'd driven off a cliff, and it turned out that he was like seriously into debt. And then people tried to spend the night at the house and would like come out screaming and saying the horrible, horrible things that happened. Pretty scary, right? Oh, but it gets worse, because later on, a family of 5 was offered the chance to move into a house rent-free, and they disappeared. Not a trace was seen of them. So B and Bob, like, react normally, like, I would never want to go there. That sounds like a terrible place. And Jupiter's like, well, we're going to take a camera and a tape recorder and find out if it's haunted. I hope it is haunted, because then we'll have a place for Alfred Hitchcock. You know, never mind the people disappearing and the possibility of a blue phantom. But, you know, Jupiter Jones, what are you going to do?